Hello and welcome to another Stellarian Games video. In this episode, we're going to be covering the last of our lava UDT terrain series. In this one, we're going to be covering how to make kind of a magical portal into this lava domain. This one is a doorway. It's a magnetic doorway, so it can come off, could be replaced by other doorways if you wanted a different style. It could also be replaced by an altar or something like that. So this could be either an entrance into this lava realm or an exit into some other realm if you're trying to get out of this lava realm. So this is a really interesting feature where you can kind of jump around using this portal kind of system. This is just a raised platform on some volcanic rock. Leading up to this, I have a stairway that connects to this so that it's a joined stairway all the way down to the bottom. This joins in very nicely, but I also have some broken stairs that would sit like this. That would force some adventurers to have to jump over the lava. And I also have a second arch, so it would form kind of a double archway to do the same thing, only they'd have to make two jumps in order to get over to that platform. So these arches and stairways go along with it. They could also be used really together if you wanted to make just a single archway over some lava, a very modular system for all of these pieces. So we're going to be covering this, and after this lava series, we're going to be switching gears and probably looking at some other UDT and some other projects that I have in the works. So enjoy, let's go to the table and see how this is done. Okay, for this craft, we are going to start with a bunch of scraps of XPS foam of varying widths. Some are 1 inch, some are custom ripped pieces, and we're just cutting the first section into kind of a rough island shape. This will be the tower section for the very top. I had a leftover scrap octagon from a different project, so that's what I'm using for the top of it. That's why I have that already cut out. I'm using the large kitchen knife again to continue making the base of the island, just shaping it so that the pieces sit on top of one another, and then cutting out some other small islands to serve as the basis for the stairways later on. Now we're gluing the pieces together just so that I can continue shaping the piece, trying to hide that seam as best as possible. I'm using some hot glue and filling in some loose chunks of the XPS to try to mask that seam without making it too obvious that it's masking. Once painted, you'll hardly notice that that seam is there. Next, we're going to start working on the walkways. So I'm cutting in a section into that island so that it'll have a place to rest, and then just kind of getting the right size, trimming it so that it has a nice square bottom, and getting it so that I have an angle that matches up with that octagon side. Next, we're getting the height right, cutting that so that the height matches the surface height of the platform. Now we're going to measure an arc for the archway leading over to the other side. Taking this over to the hot wire cutter, cutting out that loose arch. And then getting this ready to add the stairway elements. Shaving off the one side so that the stairway has something to butt up against. I didn't want this to join it at a 90-degree angle, so I ended up with just kind of an odd angle. I thought that would add a little bit more interest. Now I'm working on the stairway leading up to that arched walkway, just using an alpha knife to cut in the stairway elements. Now we're going to start on one of the stairway arches over to the main island, again cutting into that island section, fitting it so that I'm getting the right height over to that other piece, and then just kind of cutting that to the right size. Again, adding another archway, cutting that out on the hot wire. And making sure that that fits nicely along the edge. I had to bevel kind of the inside of that archway so that it would sit flush up against the other piece. Now I had to add the lower section of the stairway. There wasn't enough room to add the full length of the stairway and add a little bit more interest. I wanted the stairway to bend in the middle of it. I'm using a pen to add some stone texture to the archways and to the top surface of the platform. Every surface will have these stones just engraved with a pen. Once all that was done, I realized I would like another stairway, but this time it would have a ruined edge. So I made kind of a similar mimic of the other stairway, and I'm putting in the brickwork ahead of time because I like to cut out kind of where the actual stones would be. So I'm putting in the brickwork, and then I'm going to use a knife to cut away the edges of that stone to make it look like it's a broken and crumpled archway. So I'm following that brickwork pattern that I already had penned in, and that'll give it kind of a believable look as if the stones were falling away from the arch. I'm going to use some of those free stones that I cut away as some ruined elements along the bottom of that free archway. I'm just gluing all of those elements in place. And adding those free brickworks that I kept behind. Then I decided to add yet another archway because it just kept popping into my head. And in this time, we're going to cut in another element and make that joining T section of the archway. So it'll have broken edges on either end, forming kind of that double archway over to the main platform. Cutting out that T archway on the hot wire cutter. And then I'm just going to get it sized right so that it runs pretty flush along the top edge as well. Drawing in the stonework ahead of time again so that I can follow it and cut away the stones to make the believable pattern. And keeping some of those stones again to put on the base. Now I wanted to start working on the doorway, and I knew I wanted to have it a magnetic attachment so that I could replace the doors or do something different. So I just cut in a small hole, put in some hot glue, and a tiny neodymium magnet. I ended up putting in 3 along the edge instead of just a 1. And then I'm using just a scrap piece of metal that would be able to attach to that magnet edge. That'll be the base of the doorway. I'm measuring out the archway for the doorway, cutting that out on the hot wire cutter. Then I'm taking that and cutting a consistent edge in so that it'll form the archway. Then I'm shaving it a little bit thinner and shaving the inside of it a little bit thinner yet. That'll be the doorway, and then I'll have a very thin shave for some of the texture work that I do later on. So I'm using a pencil to put in the wood planking for the door. And then on that very thin shaved piece, I'm going to shape in the metal trim work for the door. And I'm putting some tacky glue on, putting on that trim work and some decorative pieces, and then decorating the entire arch with the stonework. I'm using a tinfoil roll to add some texture to the stone, and then I cut in the recesses to the archway as well. Then I glued on that metal plate on the bottom, which would form the magnetic edge. I'm using that tinfoil roll to texture all of the pieces to give it a little bit more of a stone texture to all of the stonework. Now on to painting. Using the black paint and Mod Podge mixture, this should give it a nice hard black coat. Once that's fully dried, I decided I wanted to add a little bit more weight to the bottom of these pieces because I wanted them to be playable, having figures stand on top of them. I added a whole bunch of screws to the bottom of these bases, but I ended up actually adding some stones on the backside as well to make sure that they would balance properly. Now I'm using just a light gray dry brush for the stonework and then hitting the rock texture as well to bring out some of the highlights. Next I'm working on the door, adding some red paint to the wood paneling. I didn't want this to just look like a wooden, brown wooden door. I wanted this to be a little bit fancier, have a more magical feel. For the metal surround, I'm using some gold paint. And I'm adding some brighter gold into the circles, inner circles of the platform to give it a little bit more of a magical feel. I continued those circles down along the edges. That'll continue the full look. So here are all the pieces that we just made for this project. The double archway broken allows players to jump across, get into the middle section, and that magical door. I added some of the other lava pieces that I've been working on in this entire series, and it makes for quite an interesting scene. Having that doorway, the forge, some of the lava domes, etc. makes a great lava setup. So I hope you like this video. If you do, please hit the like button and subscribe, and we'll see you again next time. Thank you.